Vistabhya virajam Svanam namridayan vrishaha Yatra chadya pumanashte Bhagavan shabda gocharaha Sattvam vistabhya virajam Svanam no mridayan vishaha Yatra chadya pumanaste Bhagavan shabda gocharaha Nam nustabhya virajam Svanam no mridayan Yatra chadya pumanaste Yavirajam Svanam no vilasha Yatra chadya pumanaste Bhavan shabda gochara Satyam vistabhya virajam Anam no milayan mishaha Yatra chadya pumanaste Bhagavan shabda gochara Sattvam vistabhya virajam Svanam no mridayan risha. Very nice. Anyone else? Yatra chadya pumanaste Bhagavan shabda gochara Yatra in the Vaikuntha planets. Cha and Adya original. Puman person. Aste is there. Bhagavan the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shabda gocharaha understood through the Vedic literature. Sattvam the mode of goodness. Vishtabhya accepting. Virajam uncontaminated. Svanam of his own associates. Naha us. Mridayan increasing happiness. Rishaha the personification of religious principles. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through the Vedic literature. He is full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. Repeat after me. In the Vaikuntha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through the Vedic literature. He is full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion or ignorance. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. Purport. The kingdom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the spiritual sky. In the spiritual sky cannot be understood by any process other than hearing from the description of the Vedas. No one can go to see it. In this material world also, one who is unable to pay to go to a far distant place by motorized conveyances can only understand about that place from the authentic books. Similarly, the Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky are beyond this material sky. The modern scientists who are trying to travel in space are having difficulty going to even the nearest planet, the moon, to say nothing of the highest planets within the universe. There is no possibility that they can go beyond the material sky. enter the spiritual sky and see for themselves the spiritual planets, Vaikunta. Therefore, the kingdom of God in the spiritual sky can be understood only through the authentic descriptions of the Vedas and the Puranas. In the material world, there are three modes of material qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But in the material world, spiritual world, there is no trace of modes of passion and ignorance. There is only the mode of goodness, which is uncontaminated by any tinge of ignorance or passion. In the material world, even if a person is completely in goodness, he is sometimes subject to be polluted by tinges of the modes of ignorance and passion. But in the Vaikunta world, the spiritual sky, only the mode of goodness in its pure form exists. The Lord and his devotees reside in the Vaikunta planets, and they are of the same transcendental qualities, namely Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness. The Vaikunta planets are very dear to the Vaishnavas, and for the progressive march of the Vaishnavas towards the kingdom of God, the Lord himself helps his devotees. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. My dear Krishna, in front of me is devotees who are most senior to me in all respects. I pray that I may be able to speak, you may be able to speak through me and contribute something of worth, of use. Today is a very, Hare Krishna devotees, today is a very special day, very auspicious day. Number one, it is Ekadashi. What Ekadashi is today? Does anyone know? Kamadeva? Kamada Ekadashi. And today, here in Sydney Temple, they are celebrating the Vyasa Puja of our very dear His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. Since I won't be here today for the facilitation, I thought I would say some couple of words for glorification of Maharaj. Of course, I met Maharaj very early on in my Krishna consciousness when he came here in Sydney over 10 years ago just. And I didn't know who I met. I didn't know what any stories about him. Didn't know anything about him. He came in his wheelchair. And I sat in front of him. He touched my head. I remember that occasion. But nothing really registered at that moment. It's only recently that I really realized who I met. Not even. And of course, our great Sangha of devotees here in Sydney, many of them are disciples and followers of His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, and we know that how much he contributes to his disciples and to the wider movement of the devotees. If we can only be 1/1,000,000th or 1/1,000,000,000th of a devotee as His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj would be a very great devotee. So I'd like to pay my respects. So, in yesterday's verse, and Prabhu gave a very nice class, thank you Prabhu. The previous verse spoke about the Vaikunta Vasis in the Vaikunta planets. And the Vaikunta is known as a place that's without anxiety, Vaikunta. And how their bodies are the same as Lord Vishnu. And in essence that means that they've achieved Sarupya Mukti, which is obtaining the same form. But then they also reside with the Lord. Salokya, and there's arguments that they also have Shashti and Samipya, but they don't have Sayujya in the sense that they've merged with the Supreme, but the fact that they within the light there in the planet of the Lord, one can also say they have achieved Sayujya Mukti as well, arguable both ways. But this verse itself is describing the Lord himself, Adya Puman, the original person. And so in this verse, Srila Prabhupada has made it very important for us to understand the subject matter here, the underlying subject matter, which is one, firstly, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and then His abode, and how we can understand that. And the word used in the verse is Shabda Gochara. So he's only approachable, the Lord, through Shabda Praman, through the Vedic literature. We understand that there are three ways of understanding a subject matter. So one is through direct perception, pratyaksha. The next is anuman, or logic. And the third is Shabda, which is known as from the authoritative text or from an authoritative source. And in our material culture, if you can call it a culture, they perceive direct perception as being the highest form of obtaining knowledge. And there itself, an assumed basis, assumed premise of understanding knowledge, they've failed at the first step. Actually, the highest form of knowledge is Shabda, because the knowledge has descended from above. It has descended from a place of pureness, of goodness, where there's no faults. We have 4 faults, of course. Knowledge which is obtained from a source which has none of those faults is known to be the most superior form of knowledge. So here, there's a very stern, or at least very clear statement that the Lord can only be understood by Shabda, the authoritative source. And the authoritative source is to be heard. It can't be concocted, and it, like we were speaking about last week, and it cannot be somewhat obtained from a source which is not authoritative. It must be heard from an authoritative source. We hark back, we're always there. At the Bhagavad Gita, at the end of the 6th chapter, the Lord says, Madgatena Taratmana, the one who always resides with me, is the highest of all. In the very next verse, he says, Maya Sakta Manaparta. And then he says, Tats Trinu. Just listen. How you can know me in full is to hear. And similarly, in Bhagavatam, in this 3rd canto, when Brahma is praying for the creative energy from the Lord, 3.9.11, he uses the word Shrut Ikshita. Shruta meaning to hear, and then Ikshita meaning to see. So the Lord is seen through the ear. That's essentially the statement here. The Lord is seen by hearing from authoritative sources. In that way, by Shabda, one actually obtains pratyaksha through that source. It goes like in that direction. In that verse, he says, your devotees can see you through the ears by the process of bona fide hearing, and thus their hearts become cleansed, and you take your seat there. That's how powerful hearing is. It enters through the ears. Because it's from an authoritative source, it skips through the mind, especially if one is quietened the mind, and enters the heart. And in that heart, the Lord sits there. This Shrut Ikshita word, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes it in the purport 3.9.11. He says the Shrut Ikshita path, he says the Shrut Ikshita pada, or the Shrut Ikshita path, is to hear from bona fide devotees who are conversant with the Vedic wisdom, free from mundane sentiment. By this bona fide hearing process, the neophyte devotee becomes cleansed of all material rubbish, and thus he becomes attached to one of the many transcendental forms of the Lord as described in the Vedas. This prayer by Lord Brahma to the Lord, Supreme Lord, is used again, or is called back by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 3.1.1.1. And it's the same verse. Prabhupada translates it a bit differently. And there Prabhupada emphasizes devotional service. You can see the difference, because in Chaitanya Charitamrita there's a sweetness involved there. And Prabhupada emphasizes by devotional service one can actually see the Lord. But Prabhupada also writes again about Shruta Ikshita. He says the word Shruta in Shrut Ikshita Pada refers to the Vedas, and Ikshita indicates the way to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead is by proper study of the Vedic scriptures. One cannot imagine something about God or his form. Such imagination is not accepted by those who are serious about enlightenment. Here, Brahma says that one can know Krishna through the path of properly understanding the Vedic texts. If by studying the form, name, qualities, pastimes, and paraphernalia of the Supreme Godhead, one is attracted to the Lord, he can execute devotional service, and the form of the Lord will be impressed in his heart and remain transcendently situated there. Unless the devotee actually develops transcendental love for the Lord, it is not possible for him to think always of the Lord within his heart. How nice. So it's a very scientific process. This is not an imagined process. This is not some kind of faith practice. We're stepping in, as His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj says all the time, we're stepping into the Vedic laboratory. And in that respect, we are entering into this process with a goal in mind. We want love of Krishna, and we say it every day. We want love of Krishna. And in that respect, the way to obtain that love is through this process provided by the authoritative sources. And they are saying that you must hear, that you must study these Vedic scriptures, which is as good as hearing as well. These pages, Prabhupada says, contains his ecstasies. He's writing with love. And for us, reading it is the same as associating with him. But similarly, when you hear about Krishna, when you read about Krishna, and just by talking in this room about Krishna, being in this room, we are associating with Krishna. And that's how we can see Krishna. It's non-different. So, and in that way, this process is naturally relishable. But it has to happen over time, continuously, without any stopping. Without ceasing this practice, one must always hear and hear and hear, must always be around the association of devotees, talking about Krishna. Because in one way, that's exactly why Shravanam Kirtanam, that's why it's given as a process of devotional service, hearing. One might think, well, what is hearing? How are you serving by hearing? What are you actually giving to Krishna? But you're associating with him. And you're entering into the doorstep whereby he comes and sits in your heart. And that itself is a service. Krishna wants that. Prabhupada is saying that. Similarly, in the 5th canto, 18th chapter, verse 26, in the prayers offered by the residents of Jambudvip, they refer to the Lord as Adrishta Rupa Vicharasi Urusvanaha. Adrishta Rupa, Adrishta, Drishta meaning to see, Adrishta, not seen, the form that is not seen. Vicharasi, wandering. Urusvanaha, Uru, great, Svana, vibration, sound. The Lord is not seen, but He is wandering in the great sound, His great sound. And he says that in the Bhagavad Gita, He's the Pranava. So when we are considering these subject matters, who are we? What is our duty? Who is the Lord? What are the Lord's features? And in this context of this chapter, what is the description of the Lord's abode, the spiritual world? Who is there? What's happening there? The description, we can only obtain that from the authoritative source. And it's not a concept of faith or I believe this. It's a concept of accepting it and practicing it. And Srila Prabhupada would always say this: your mother is the only evidence of who your father is. Similarly, your birth certificate and your parents are the only authority for where you were born, which hospital you were born, how you were born. Similarly, these texts are the only evidence, these authoritative sources, and the acharyas are the only authoritative sources for which we can understand where we come from. And this power of hearing is quite profound in the sense that not only do we see the Lord, but we end up seeing the reality for which that occurs around us. We understand that there are 3 realities. There's the spiritual reality, there's the material reality, and the subtle reality. The material and subtle reality is kind of the realm that we're within now, but more in the gross material reality. The spiritual reality is the supreme material world, and our the energy of the soul and the Lord's energies. And then you have the subtle realm, or subtle reality, which are things that I will explain as we come towards the closing of discussing this verse. But in that sense, one can actually see the reality through hearing. In the 11th canto, 14th chapter, text 26, they say through the process of chanting and hearing, one gradually recovers the power to see. Tata tata pashyati vastu shukshmam. And it says, just like when the diseased eye is treated by medicinal ointment, one sees things as they are. They see the Lord. And we see examples of this in the Vishnu Puran. It also describes the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj. And there it says on the 8th day he was able to see the subtle beings in the sky. You know, we hear stories of Srila Prabhupada, quite nice stories. Used to say that Narada Muni and Lord Shiva would attend his lectures. There's one story by Yamuna Devi in London, 1969. She was chanting the second Hare Krishna Kirtan of the day. She had the harmonium. She was just beneath Srila Prabhupada, chanting with such love. Everyone who was there can attest to how beautiful Yamuna Devi would sing. And as she was singing, Srila Prabhupada, in the middle of the kirtan, he starts singing, Narada Muni Bhajye Veena Radhika Ramana Namne. And she stopped. Prabhupada looked. Carry on. And she sings, and then again Prabhupada chanted, Narada Muni Bhajye Veena Radhika Ramana Namne. And no one knows what was going on. No one knows what was happening. They continued somehow. And at the end, someone asked Prabhupada, when he went to his room, said, he was singing during the kirtan, what was it? Narada Muni came for the kirtan. He was chanting. So I was welcoming him. Another story in LA from Dina Dayadri Devidasi. She says Narada Muni was there and Prabhupada was laughing. And she said, why are you laughing? So Narada Muni here. What was happening? He was laughing when he saw the Malechas and Chandalas dancing and chanting Hare Krishna. And similarly, Prabhupada would also say sometimes that he would speak with Krishna. Of course, these are very deep, but it's not. One cannot discount that he followed and he showed us the process by which we can at least have a peek through the window to see Krishna through hearing. Therefore, the exalted devotees can understand very simply and see the Lord's abode, just like we know that the sun exists behind the clouds. Just like that, they know that the Lord is always there. Even though he may not be, his rupa form might not be present here, he is actually present here. He's present. He's right there on the altar. He's right here in the sounds, vibration of Krishna's holy name. He's here within the heart of all the devotees. He's here in the smell of what we offer to the Lord. He's here in all that we touch, the books, the beads. So this first part of the purport, Prabhupada emphasizes this point of understanding that we must hear from authority. And then he speaks about the three modes. And the word that's crucial here is virajam, or uncontaminated. So the prefix here is vi, and then the word that follows is rajam, or passion. And vi, this prefix, can either be one that separates or intensifies the word. So we know that, for example, the one that's often used is desh, meaning place, or home, and then you have videsh, which is foreign land. But then you can also have jnana and vijnana, knowledge and realized knowledge. In this sense, virajam, it's not intensifying passion, it is separating, he's beyond, he's uncontaminated. There's words, viraja tamas as well, beyond passion and ignorance. One can also consider in that respect. And so the Lord is completely uncontaminated by this. We hear this all the time and one can simply accept it, but one simply needs to understand one's position as being one that is disturbed by the modes of goodness, passion and ignorance to at least appreciate this fact that actually the Lord and the residents of Vaikuntha and the Vaikuntha planet, planets, the supreme spiritual world, they are uncontaminated. And so, just like Prabhupada says, you pay a motor conveyancing fee, just like we might have to, if you want to go for a ride on a theme park, we have to pay a certain cost. Just like if we want to practice a particular occupation, we have to first obtain a degree. In a similar sense, we have to consider that we have to be in a position in which we become uncontaminated. It's a very difficult proposition. There's a nice story of Adikesh Paramal. There were the two demons once. It was Kesha and Keshi. One male, one female. Brother and sister. And the two demons became extremely powerful and created havoc all over the material world. The devas were so perturbed by them. Nobody could subdue them at all. They were so powerful. Finally, the devas, like in this instance, when they see that something is going wrong, they go and approach someone. This time they actually went to the source. They went to Lord Vishnu and offered prayers and sought assistance from Lord Vishnu. Please, these Kesha and Keshi, they're so demonic. They're creating such havoc. The religious purificatory performances are not being done. They're disturbing all of those performances. Please. And Lord Vishnu said, don't worry. He said, I'll send someone. And so he sends Anantashesh, great snake form of Lord Balaram. And Anantashesh came. And so when Anantashesh came, he got Kesha, the male. He went and got him and wrapped him in his coil. And Lord Vishnu came and then lied down on Anantashesh. And Keshi would come and to try to tell Kesha how to get out, try to give him some clues. But at that respect, the Lord established 7 or 8 lingas. So if Keshi would come, Lord Shiva would protect. And Kesha never came. He was subdued completely. In this respect, when we're thinking about uncontaminated, beyond passion and ignorance, Lord Vishnu was assisted by his devotee Anantashesh. Anantashesh was assisted by Lord Shiva. This was in this respect, that entire process of relationship with the Lord was to keep rajas and passion out of this material world, out of the demons out. Parityanaya sadhanam vinashaya chaturashkritam. So the Lord actually controls these demonic propensities in this world, even though we think that we're subject to them and they're happening. The Lord is still the controller of those energies. So ultimately, if we want it to be uncontaminated, we still go to the source. The process remains the same. But also, in these pastimes, the Lord charms the heart of the devotee while teaching. That's very nice. When going back to the first part of the purport, because I think it's quite interesting to go deeper in this discussion of the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada says no one can learn the spiritual world using essentially a material empirical approach. We cannot understand, and we discussed this. And we see in Prabhupada's books, he always continually smashes scientists. And these books were written when? In the 1960s and 1970s. He's written these books. And he's smashing these scientists, saying they don't know. They haven't been able to do anything. They haven't created life yet. What's the year now? 2022. Prabhupada can write the same thing. It applies the same. The scientists haven't achieved anything. They haven't achieved anything. They're simply making experiments. If we look at them with even objective view, they're making experiments. They have limited breadth of understanding of the subject matter itself. So they're trying to learn about the subject without understanding the subject matter. And then on top of it, they're using their limited resources, which includes the resources which they use to survey the particular subject matter, but also their senses, which then has to perceive the instrument that they use. And then they make approximations, assumptions, guesswork to come to a result. And then they give it what they call a theory. It's never, this is the fact. One famous atheist who believes in this science, because it's a religion, this approach of believing is a religion. They say this is not a religion, this is a religion. This is believing, this process of direct empirical perception. Is Ricky Gervais. And he would say, if you took away the Bible and all of the stories and all of those what he called the fictions there, they would never come again. But say you wiped out all the knowledge of science, it would come back again. So that's why science is more important. But we can see that the underlying assumption there is that something else, he hasn't answered what's created all of this, what's happening here. He doesn't understand the subject matter. The premise is wrong. But if we look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, which has existed eternally, it's given the universe in its exact measurements. In your it's given exactly the measurements. There's no fumbling around or guesswork or theory. It's like, this is the measurement, that's it. That's it. And so we humans in this body can't even approach the material world and understand the material world. What are we talking about the spiritual world? And the scientists, though, they say, when we say this, they say, you are simply trying to deflect, that you cannot prove that the spiritual world exists. You're simply deflecting. You can't, there's no evidence. But we have. We can conclude. Using the sources of knowledge, we can conclude. And the way in which we conclude is we'll use the acronym SPIRIT. And each one is a point, evidence. So spirit, S, soul's origin. We can prove that the spiritual worlds exist through the soul's origin. So once, the process is we understand that the body and the soul, they're two different things, and there's a drastic diversity between what is matter and what is spirit. The wholly different characteristics, wholly different properties. And so once we understand that we are the soul, then the next question is, well, where did we come from? And just like every living entity, every material body has a particular home, the soul has a home. Just like a gold comes from a gold mine, the soul comes from a place. And what is that place? The spiritual world. So that is one of the evidences that we can conclude. It's a strong one. Next, P, spirit, P, paranormal phenomena. So we know about this, and we discuss this a lot of the times when we do outreach. Not everything that occurs in this material world is explainable by material science. Things like ESP, PSI, they call it psychokinesis, when people can move things without touching them. Staring, have you heard of staring? They've done an experiment of people who've they look at someone when their back turned to them. They look at them, and it's called staring. And most times, 99% of the time, people can actually figure out someone is looking at them, and we can feel it sometimes. Someone's looking at me. There's a funny story of a devotee, Narayan Das. Back in the day, he used to look at people, stare at people, and get them to look at him. And he tried it on Prabhupada; it didn't work. But this thing is an occurring phenomena. Ghosts, spirits, astral projection, out of body experiences, deja vu. This thing of having seen something. These are all paranormal experiences. And Michael Cremo, Adia Prabhu, not Sataputta, it starts with D, sorry. Karma Prabhu. He says wishing away these paranormal phenomena is as unscientific, is based off hallucination, is bad science. There are explanations for these, and they don't exist in material science. They exist from the spiritual world and the understanding of spirit, matter, where the soul comes from, and why we're here. And then, and most importantly, it shows that there's a reality. Like I was saying before, there was the three separate realities. There is a reality beyond the gross material reality. That's what we understand from these paranormal experiences. Spirit, and then I. Innate longing for eternity. We all have an innate longing for eternity. All of us do. We always want something to happen, and we want that to happen forever. Happiness, love, a house by the sea, waterfront home. Maybe we want that forever. We want it now, we want it forever. We everything around us is temporary, right? And we all accept it. But still we want something that's permanent. Where did this longing for impermanence or eternality, where did it come from? And so from this we can infer that there is a place where these longings are fulfilled. Just like here, there's basic needs like water, food, companionship, those different needs that we have, they're all fulfilled here. Similarly, there's an innate longing for eternality that's fulfilled, and it's not fulfilled here because it's temporary. It's fulfilled in the spiritual world. So that's the innate longing for eternity. Spirit, this is one we've been discussing, is the revelation of the scriptures and the realization of the sages and saintly persons. So we can see that the qualities of the saintly persons that we meet or we read about, we can understand that they are relishing something that is not material. We can see straight away there's something that this person is seeing and is experiencing that is something that I haven't experienced through the material realm, through the material process that's given. Go to school, study, work, try to obtain a better life, more money, nice wife, kids, etc. This person is beyond that and experiencing happiness through that. You know, there's one story of a saintly sannyasi residing by the Ganges during the time of the zamindars in I think it was in eastern India, and that zamindar had told people, his goons, if you see these sannyasis and you're coming and trying to spread this Hindu religion amongst this Mohammedan, where I want this Mohammedan rule, you just spit on them. Just spit on them. And so this saintly person would be there, and obviously he's a Brahmin practicing saucha, or being purified and sanctified at all times. He passed this one man, and this one man did a big, you know, the spitting where you get everything, you scrape everything out, and you spat. And the saintly person just went and he said, what to do? He bathed in the Ganges, came out, crossed by that person. The person did it again. He did the whole thing, just got him and bathed. And the same thing was happening. He'd keep going, come back, I'd spit him on again. And then he'd go, maybe I'll go a different direction, sit there. And then the guy would find him and spit on him. And then he'd bathe in the Ganges. And this would happen 60, 70 times. And suddenly, while he was passing again, he'd bathe in the Ganges. And then the guy who was spitting said, my mouth is hurting. My mouth is hurting. Why are you not getting angry? Why are you not... You know, this is meant to disturb you from your practice and make you look like a fool. Like, why are you? And he says, because of you, I've bathed in the Ganges 60, 70 times. Thank you to you. This is a vision or experience that one can only experience as, you know, being a saintly person or actually undertaking the process of provided in the Vedas. And we have experiences ourselves. I mean, Jayapataka Swami Maharaj, saintly person, always speaking about the glories of Lord Chaitanya, done so much for Prabhupada, done so much for this movement. How many disciples? Sustaining all of them. Now, where is this energy coming from? He's connected with Krishna, connected with God, and God has his abode. And also we see that there are descriptions given in the Vedas of places, and they're correct to the decimal point. They're correct in the mature world. For example, the rocks that Rama used to cross into Lanka, they found the rocks. There's no where Ayodhya is. They found where the description of Mathura Vrindavan. The Goswamis have excavated and they found it. It's all true. So these prove that there is a spiritual world because these same texts are also speaking about the spiritual world. Spirit, the next is I. Inconceivable consistency amidst global diversity. Inconceivable consistency amidst global diversity. So we see there are various world traditions. They each have a different language, dress. Some of them mostly have different modes of worship, ways of speaking. But there is a consistency in the ideas of these theistic traditions. That they're beyond this temporary world, there is spirit, there's spiritual world that's beyond here. Even if it's perhaps not completely accurate in the sense that they've maybe missed the mark in understanding what the spiritual world is, but still there is an example. You know, the Vikings, they had Valhalla, you know. The Greeks, they had Zeus and in his Olympus. It was actually Indra, but still they knew that there was a spiritual world. The Egyptians, they had Ra in the kingdom of Ra. indigenous people of this land, they have their own world of dreaming, which is beyond this world. There's that conception. Beyond, in all of these theistic traditions, there is the consistency of this idea that there is a spiritual world. This idea didn't manifest from somewhere or manifest from concoction. It's there, it's true, it's innate. And then the last one is transformational potency of spirituality, which links with the second last one. This transformational potency we can experience ourselves. Just like we were speaking Virajam, the uncontaminated. One can feel in this process slowly over time with practice that naturally the things that were affecting you before, they're no longer affecting you. Ganesham gives this story in an outreach program that he was, I won't go too much, but there was some downtimes before he came to Krishna consciousness, and he started coming to programs and it felt better, and then he came, and then he forgot the last time he felt down. It's transformational. So, and we see the serious spiritualists that become detached from matter and attached to spirit. And we can see this in their conduct. So what is this higher reality that they're experiencing? You know, that's the question here. What is this higher reality? We can infer directly. This higher reality that we can't see, they're experiencing something, it's spiritual, it's real, it comes from somewhere else, because I don't see the source. The source is not directly relevant, it comes from the authority. This authority is saying that there's a spiritual world. So the happiness they get from this higher reality is indicative of the spiritual reality, the spiritual world. You might say that these are all inferences, we're making all these inferences. No, but these are based, just like they have direct, their process of understanding something is through direct perception, we're giving the same. These are the same. This is the same process. Our Shabda is fine. We don't need to argue on that point. We're fine. We're completely... Their Shabda is still... They're trying to catch up. They're making their Shabda right now. They're making their textbooks. They're constructing them. They're trying to understand everything. So they won't be able to argue with us. They'll dismiss it. But on their platform, which is the Pratyaksha Anuman, that's it. We can prove that there is a spiritual world. So I'll end there, Prabhu. If there's any questions, criticisms. Yes, Prabhu.
I'm just trying to understand the word Shakti-Gochara you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
It's Prabhupada translated as understood through the Vedic literature. Shabda, I guess, refers to sound, right? In the sense that Lordship can be understood, as said in the Bhagavatam, name, form, pastimes, paraphernalia, place of worship. So there are quite a few means, right? I mean, at least for us these days.
Yes, there are many means to understand the Lord. But obviously, just like in the list that Sri Prahlad Maharaj gives, the first is Shravanam. Just like when we understand how the material world expanded, first comes ether, then sound, then air. Sound is first. There's a deep reason, and maybe one of the Prabhus can expand further onto this. But from the understanding is a lot of the other because the sound is non-different from Krishna, and so it completely pierces through any sort of preconceptions we have. Although we might be able to see Krishna, there's a bit of a difference. Probably anyone want to expand on this point? I would really appreciate. But it's true. Yes, we have all of these means to and we utilize every single one of them. Don't get me wrong. But of course, the first thing to do, and we'll see throughout the whole Vedic literatures, the first thing is always there's hearing. Time and time again, the first thing is hearing. But the thing is, we can then, obviously we hear, and then we go and we engage in particular services that we of course feel comfortable and feel a preference for. And we have pujaris who may or may not, but obviously are engaged in pujari services, people who engage in beautiful garland making. People engage in tulsi worship. There's different preferences, and there's a process in bhakti, starting from shraddha and then moving on. But as we progress in that cycle, just now Srimad Kavacha Prabhu was speaking, just because as we progress doesn't mean that we don't do the first, which is establish the faith, and faith comes from hearing. Okay, and the difference, and there's a more subtle idea, at least from reading the Vedic literatures, is that the hearing, there's the reading about Krishna is considered hearing as well in that respect, and Prabhupada has translated it in such a way as well. Yes. The difference is for the pure devotees and the spiritual masters, especially those who, I'm not one to say, but one who have at least qualified themselves to be in a position like that, who have the adhikar to be like that. They're completely dependent on Krishna, and Krishna takes care of them. And in such a sense, they're actually in Vishuddha Sattva. They're Jivan Muktas, in the sense that they are liberated whilst living this life. And such, they're not subject to modes of material nature. That's the understanding. Of course, we've seen things within the movement where it might not be as such, but those who are obviously practicing and in that stage, they're not subject. But otherwise, if we're just in the mode of goodness and we see it all the time that you can be subject, we have experiences ourselves. Myself, I can try to be in goodness, and then there'll be some disturbance. Yes, it's Prabhupada has spoken. Yes. Vaikunta, no anxiety. Anxiety means no duratyaya existence, which is no material modes of nature. It's all the Lord's energy, spiritual energy there. Vaikunta.
Can you please elaborate on the last line of the purport and translation? It says that the Lord Himself helps His devotees. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. How does He do that?
Parityanaya sadhanam vinashaya dushkritam dharma samsthapanataya sambhavami yuge. He comes and reestablishes it Himself. He comes down Himself for His devotees. In the spiritual world, He's always there. He's their associate, so He's always there with them. There's no question about that. But here, because there's that idea that we have separated ourselves, we have attempted to separate ourselves from the Lord and enjoy ourselves, He Himself comes down and He helps. And then we have also yoga, in the process of going back to Him, yoga kshema vaham yaham. He comes and He carries what we lack and preserves what we have.
Just a comment and a question. The comment is that same sannyasi, I've heard that that's actually
Tukaram. Right. Yes.
You say, why should I get angry with you? Because of you spitting on me, I've taken bath and be angry 100 times.
Yes. Yes.
The question is that, so we understand Krishna consciousness is a scientific process for what it sounds like. And he says it's empirical, empirically verified. Krishna has given us the hypothesis, the process, and the result of it is very outlined in the Bible and in Krishna consciousness. However, it's also understood that we can only empirically verify Krishna consciousness with our spiritualized senses, not our material senses. So right now we're trying to understand Shabda. For example, we mentioned the distances to different planets that we're reading. Right now we're understanding the kingdom of God, the right and the good stuff. So we're trying to understand Shabda with our material senses, like all senses. So can we actually understand Shabda with our material senses, or do our senses need to be spiritualized to understand Shabda? Or is Shabda just completely independent of our material senses, or of our senses?
I'll speak from my level of understanding, Prabhu. So these things, that these spiritual subject matters, we approaching them in the sense of like we're trying to understand them perhaps may not be the best approach we can take to this. Like I was saying before, there's this idea of first accepting and engaging in the process, and that understanding coming to us rather than us understanding. It's a process which is supplied, not demanded. And in that respect, we have the great verse, Tadami Buddha Yogam Tam Yena Mam Upayanti Te. By actually doing the service, Krishna himself gives the intelligence. He himself gives us the understanding of how to get to him. And that includes everything that's got to do with Krishna. So in that respect, we might not be currently, if we use the word understanding, we might not currently understand this process. Or we might not understand the spiritual world. It might be something that's further from us. But engaging in the process that's given constantly and performing service, one is given the realization. And one can actually ask Krishna, I want to serve, as you serve, please give me this. And you have this all the time. I've had this personally myself. I might be washing dishes at one program and suddenly something will hit me. Oh my God. Like, that's it. And he himself will give the understanding. Krishna himself will give it to you. This idea that of course there's effort going in one direction, but Krishna's carrying it throughout. Krishna's doing both jobs at once. He's double acting. He's going both ways, and one just simply needs to surrender to that process. And the understanding will come. It's not an idea of faith. It's an idea of accepting and performing. Yes, and one actually, and in Krishna, at least from my own experience, of course, Prabhu's you can share, is Krishna gives drops of nectar along the way, little drops of nectar that keep you understanding, going, yes, this process is valid, this process is true. I can feel the differences in my own behavior, which is the first thing that is spoken about. So I can go, all right, okay, that means that whatever else is saying, that there is some truth in it, but also you give some little drops of spiritual nectar here and there as well. Yes, probably any more comments, question? Okay, Granth Raj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.
So it means that Shraddha is completely independent of our